Today we're talking about things that you might not want to do as a street photographer, or things to avoid when you're shooting on the street. All of these are not strict rules that you have to follow, but rather it's more of a concept that you can use while creating, and hopefully these will facilitate you on your street photography journey. So without further ado, let's get started. The very first thing is don't check your LCD screen after each shot. Things happen fairly quickly on the street, and the last thing you want to do is to miss your decisive moment or completely miss your shot because you're checking your LCD screen and simply were not paying attention to what's in front of you. Now, I'm not saying don't use your LCD screen at all. If it's there, then definitely utilize it to its fullest. But you definitely don't want to be distracted where it'll pull you out from the present in the moment. Every second you spend on staring at the photos that you just took are a seconds that you're not paying attention to your surroundings. And you definitely want to minimize that in order to increase your chance on getting the shot. Plus, it kind of brings back the magic of shooting with films. The second thing you don't want to do is to have the camera in front of your eyes all the time to photograph things, instead of changing up the angles and perspectives. And yes, I know it's really effortless, especially if you're taking photos, snapping photos really quickly on the street, but it's also lazy, and with different perspective and angles, you will be able to create more interesting photos with interesting perspectives. By choosing different angles, you get to create and offer something that we don't usually see. And sometimes all you have to do is to kneel down a bit or get to the ground if you have to, whatever it takes for the shot, right? And that's probably where a flippy screen will come in handy as well. But most importantly, if you're always taking photos of someone on the street and you are always shooting downward, this also applies especially if you're taking photos of people sitting down or you're taking photos of kids and pets. Usually you'll want to get down to their level, their perspective, which will give you a more interesting and dynamic angle. There are lots of ways to be creative here, and just try to put a little bit more efforts in every single photos that you take by changing up the point of view, instead of taking every photo from the eye level. The third thing you don't want to do as a street photographer is to only shoot at busy places. Now, by all means, I love shooting photos at busy places, like especially in the big cities. I love being surrounded by all different kinds of people, and there are just lots of opportunities to take photos of. And especially if you're limited on time, you'll be able to capture moments quickly because there are just so many people passing by the place that you might want to take photos of. But the truth is, the rest of the world are just as interesting to photograph. It's also very fun to find a quiet place and try to make things more interesting and unique in your own way. And I find that a lot more challenging and more fun compared to snapping photos in big cities. Maybe next time, challenge yourself to take photos without any people in them. If you only take photos where there are people everywhere busy on the street, then you're cutting off the majority of the world out. And honestly, I don't think street photography means that you can only shoot on busy streets. And this next don't I want to talk about is kind of related to the last one, which is not shooting close enough to your home. This is definitely something I learned and noticed in the past year, because I'm the kind of person where I keep on thinking that I need to go somewhere else in order to make photos, or just take photos of different places that I'm not familiar with, where I'm more curious about. But sometimes the most interesting and candid photo is actually really close to you. You might be passing through it every single day, but you just never took the time to notice and capture them in your camera. And this is something that I've been trying to do recently as well, and just to really check out my neighborhood, to really look closely and pay more attention to them. Even though it's something that I'm so used to, I'm still able to find interesting things to take photos of. And the results really shocked me, because inside my mind, my neighborhood is just so boring. I know it from the inside out, and I pass it by almost every day. And I feel like that's not the right kind of mindset to have as a street photographer. So try not to take your neighborhood for granted. What's something very normal to you might be very special to someone else, or it could be something that you feel like it's very normal just because you never really took the time to analyze it, to really look at it. But once you switch that kind of mindset, you'll find a lot of things to take photos of. Your neighborhood is definitely more interesting than you think. Now, before we go on, I'd like to take a second to thank all of you. You thought I was gonna say sponsor, didn't you? No, I just want to thank all of you who's been supporting this channel because recently we just hit 500 subscribers. So thank you so much. And for those of you who haven't subscribed yet, it'll be awesome if you do me a favor by smashing the like button and maybe subscribe if you're feeling cool today. Either way, I'm just really glad to see you here. With that being said, let's move on to the next one, which is don't be rude. Being kind goes a long way, especially with everything that's going on right now in this world. But whatever happens on the street while we're taking photos, definitely try to keep your cool all the time and just be nice. If you took a photo of someone and they really don't want the photos to be taken of, which happened to me plenty of time, just really talk to them, communicate with them, maybe offer them the photo. And if all of those doesn't work, then just delete the photo. If you get stopped by the security because you shouldn't be taking photos with your pro camera equipment,
with a professional camera is a permit.
then just be nice, say sorry, put it away and keep going. If you take your photos with your phone, that would definitely work as well. But whatever you do, just don't be rude and be mean to them because they're simply doing their job and we definitely want to respect that. Moving on to number 6, I believe, which is don't use likes on social medias as a metrics for how good your photo is. I feel like nowadays it's really hard to get a good constructive feedback on your photos because most people on social media are not photographers. Even if they are, there are not many street photographers. Most people only like the photo based on their first impression or simply on popularity. Like, come on, we all know that on Instagram, a photo with the person's face will get a lot more likes than a photo without any people or colors in it. Now, Twitter is a bit better, but they're more popularity driven. Now, don't get me wrong, there are tons of amazing works out there, but the overall vibe and culture, not to mention the likes and the algorithm, all of these mixed together, it's just not a good gauge to measure how good your photo is, and needless to say to use it to improve your photography at all. So instead of spending my time on social media, I'd rather spend them on actual photo books, which is like a whole other topic that we can talk about in another video. But let's move on to the next one for now, which is don't think, just shoot. Now this one is quite simple, but I actually missed some shots because of overthinking about the framing and composition and all that stuff. And now not only the photo that I had in mind was gone, I didn't even capture any of those moments that I was hoping to capture. And in fact, the moment is simply gone forever. There's no way I'll be able to get it back or recreate the scene again. So instead of overthinking and just keep on reframing or making your composition in your head or just waiting for the shot or waiting for the action to happen, it's actually better to just shoot, take the photo and take the next one. Don't wait because you don't know if it's gonna happen or not. But at least you have gotten the photo instead of losing it completely. Moving on to number 8, which is don't spend more time on researching for gear than going out to take photos. I used to spend a ridiculous amount of time just looking over and researching for gear because I was so convinced that I need the right body, right lens, right equipment to create the photos that I want to create. Now I feel like it's totally fine and really nothing to worry about if we're just researching gear and talking about them. And it's not just for street photography, like a lot of different genres of photography, people just do that naturally. But I think it's a dangerous zone to be at if you're starting to spend more time on researching gear instead of going out to shoot more. Even though gear does matter, but it's usually not the point when it comes to creating. I think it's imperative to know how to actually use your gear and utilize them to create what you have envisioned. If it comes to the point where gear is a distraction, then it's not worth it. Just pick a lens, 35 or 50, and just go out and shoot and see what you can get out of it. Meanwhile, get really comfortable with your gear. This leads to the next point I want to talk about, which is don't keep on changing your focal length. I'm a huge advocate of less is more. Having way too much option becomes a huge distraction and prevents us from focusing what's in front of us. Although experimenting with all different kinds of street photography style, different gear, focal length, or different projects are great ideas and practices, getting used to and knowing how to utilize with what you have have, it's a lot more important. I used to carry a 35 and 50 with me all the time, and I'm always indecisive whether to use a 35 or 50. Then I decided to just bring one body and one lens out all the time whenever I go out and shoot. Life was more stressful because I didn't have to think about which lens to switch to, because I did not let that to be an option anymore. I also do think it's imperative to experiment with different kind of gear, but once you know which one suits your creative needs, you don't really have to waver that much. Especially when you know what you can get out of it, it won't become that much of a distraction after all. Last but not least, don't rush. This is probably one of the most important traits as a street photographer, and I'm definitely still learning as well. But I can't emphasize on how important being patient is whenever you're trying to create something that you have in mind, that you envision. Not only you need a lot of time on personal development, but also while photographing on the street. Whenever you see a potential great photo, don't back out after 5 minutes or 10. Definitely stay there, be patient, wait for the shot that you want. The reward is so much worth it. And being patient while taking photos on the street is something that I really need to work on as well. But if you're interested in more street photography videos like this, definitely check out this video. Or if you're a beginner into photography, you can check these out as well. And I'll see you guys in the next one.